everything now. Okay, welcome. So we'll be starting off with, wait, is my mic on first? Okay, it is on. Sorry. I see a question. Sorry about that, guys. Okay, so tonight we'll be learning more about industrial psychology, and we'll be speaking on the honors applications for the different universities and their requirements, giving you a brief description of what industrial psychology is and information about the field. And then tonight our guest speaker is Mr. Thomas Tsikai. He's an industrial psychologist, and he'll give you a professional perspective on the field. And after that we'll have a Q&A session where you guys are more than welcome to ask any questions. So honors applications. Please take note of the different opening dates for the various universities and their requirements. I'm not going to read through all of them. I'll just leave them on for a few seconds so you guys can take note of them, because these are important for you guys to know when applying. And now this is the different financing options that you can have for postgrad. And these are the different websites that you guys can look at. So guys, please take note of this. I'll leave it down for a while so you can either take a screenshot, write it down quickly. But if you're wondering about financing options for honors and where you can go, please take note of the slide. It's very important. Okay, moving on. Industrial psychology. Industrial psychology is industrial and organizational psychologists focus on behavior of employees in the workplace. They apply psychological principles and research methods to improve the overall work environment, including performance, communication, professional satisfaction, and safety. Now, the salary is just an estimate, guys. It changes based on your work experience, and it changes depending on where you work. So don't expect to earn this much. It's just a rough estimate. And even the working hours do change from place to place depending on where you will be working. Career paths. You can either be a trainer, a human resources specialist, a market researcher, research analyst, a professor, an instructional designer, human resources manager, or behavior analyst. But that doesn't mean you only have to go into those parts. There are other parts that you can venture into. And if you have questions about that, feel free to ask our professional speaking tonight about those fields. And then the universities that offer this degree are the University of Pretoria, UJ, UCT, WITS, Northwest University, Stellenbosch, UNISA, University of Western Cape, Nelson Mandela University, and Fort Hare. And then for tonight, our guest speaker will be Mr. Thomas Tsikai. And guys, please pay attention to everything he says and don't be afraid to ask him. He's here to help you guys learn more about the field, and he's here to answer any questions you might have or anything concerns you might have about entering the field. Mr. Tsikai, I'm going to hand it over to you now.
All right, thank you so much. So much for the platform. I would like to firstly start by just thanking you for the invite. It's actually an honor to to share my journey with you guys. So first of all, I just want to give a breakdown of what I do, how I've reached where I am now. So I'm a practicing registered industrial psychologist. I'm also the managing consultant at Oxon Consulting Group, which is an all-round industrial psychology consulting firm. I'm also part of the management at Virtual Capacity Consultants, also at ZenMed Group, at Popular Med, and Medical Consulting Group. So I'm actually part of various consulting firms as part of senior management. Um, just by starting off, I just want to break down the journey, which definitely starts from your honors level. Because when you're in your honors, that's when you basically start to specialize. So before honors, it's not as specialized as after honors. And I will just give you a breakdown of my journey. So my journey is that I didn't study here in South Africa for my honors. I studied in Namibia, where I attained my Bachelor of Psychology honors, specializing in industrial psychology. So basically, it's just the same as here in South Africa, wherein you have your 3 years undergrad, then your 1 year honors year. So after that, what then happens is that for you to get into a specific field, a specific psychological field, it does not end at honors. So honors is basically a baseline. It just gives you a starting point in terms of your specialization. Psychology is very broad. It is branched out in different arms. There's educational psychology, clinical psychology, industrial psychology, all those other counseling psychology, sports psychology, what have you. You've got a lot of different arms of psychology. So in my instance, I'm an industrial psychologist. So after my honors, I then took a gap year. Then after the gap year, I then applied for a master's in that Master of Social Science in industrial psychology. So I just want you to also understand that it's not as easy to get into such programs because they have got strict selection criteria that they follow, that they uphold, because there are certain standards, practice standards that need to be upheld at all given times. So you will find that at most times you will get into, you first start off by applying as the same way you apply for a job, but in this case, you'll be applying for your studies. So once the application goes through, once they review the application and you make the cut, it's usually based on merit, academic merit. So it means that you have to reach a certain academic average in your honors for you to be considered for your master's. In most instances, they are looking at 60% of 70%. It depends with the university. Then for them to consider that, and you don't have to have, you just have to have at least an impressive academic, profile in terms of your undergrad and your honors. So it is the time, your honors is as important because you have to excel for you to go further. So I'm talking of the journey of an industrial psychologist. I'm not talking of only on honors level. Of course, on honors level, once you reach honors level, you've got the option to branch out and start it and venture into other things like organizational development, like the fields that have been enlisted previously, and all that. But it is not as rewarding. Why I say that? I'm saying that based on experience. So once you get into the master's stream, for you to get into the master's stream as well, you also go through an interview process wherein they interview you, they see if you are a fit to the master's stream, if you are fit to the criteria that they are looking for. for you to qualify as a psychologist, because now the master's level is wherein you are really specializing, and thereafter you can be actually deemed as a specialist. So after that, after your master's usually takes about 2 years on average, because there are two components of a master's degree in industrial psychology. And basically, the HPCSA, the Health Professions Council of South Africa, guidelines stipulate that you ought to have a coursework master's, so which means that you will be a full-time student. So when you're a full-time student, it means that you cannot do it on a part-time basis because of the demanding nature of the master's program. So once you do that on a full-time basis, your coursework usually is a year. Then your research is also a year. So basically, it's plus minus 2 years. Some take longer because of the challenging nature of the research component. Because you ought to do a proper academic thesis, which is more or less like more or less like your PhD thesis, but not as complicated. Then thereafter, for you then to progress to the next level, you have to go through an internship, which is usually a year or two, depending on how structured it is. So there are two types of internships. There is a structured internship, wherein you get an organization like your well-established organizations, for example, Discovery, take for example Old Mutual and stuff, and so forth, when they've got a ready-made program, internship program that has been approved by the HPCSA. That one is more structured. You don't need to do much, but just to do your internship there under supervision of an industrial or a specific psychology. But in this case, we're talking of industrial psychology. So under supervision of a qualified industrial psychologist who has not less than 3 years experience in the field. Thereafter, you then write board exams after you have provided evidence that you have completed your internship according to the HPCSA guidelines. So for you to write the board exams, you ought to have completed your internship, and there should be a letter from your institution where you have done the internship, confirming that you have completed the internship, a letter from your supervising psychologist confirming that your performance was up to standard for you to be considered for the board exams. So then the next step would be the board exams. For you to get to the board exams, it is based on the discretion of the council, HPCSA. Because HPCSA is the registering council, is the governing council in terms of psychology in South Africa, and in terms of any other health profession, because psychology is regarded as a health profession in South Africa. So after HPCSA gives a green light for you to sit for the board exams, there you can then select between, there are 3 sittings in a year. That will be the first sitting, usually in January, February. The second sitting, usually in around June. And the last sitting, usually around October, September, October. Then when you sit for that board exam, you ought to have a pass mark of not less than 70%. So that is this HPCSA standard. If you have less than 70%, it means that you won't be admitted or registered or considered as a psychologist. So if you fail to reach the pass mark of 70%, it means that you will have to resit in whatever next sitting that you would have selected. Until you reach a pass mark of 70 or above, that's when they will give you the green light and they will register you as a psychologist. So it also comes to the point wherein I've noticed a lot of people, they tend to call themselves psychologists when they have not reached that level. It takes time and it takes a lot of commitment. So after you have registered, that's when there are two types of registration. The first registration is called independent practice. When you are registered as an independent practice psychologist, it means that you have no one to supervise you. You are allowed to practice based on your knowledge, based on your experience and exposure, without reporting to any other psychologist. That is the category that I am registered in. Then the next category would be the supervised practice. That one means that there is always a psychologist above you that you have to report to every now and again, just to to touch base, to run whatever that you'll be focusing on with them and all that. So that one is a bit limiting. But some people are registered in supervised practice, especially those who are in the government. We're looking at especially the military. We've got so many psychologists there as well. They are usually in the supervised practice segment. Thereafter, if you want, it's based on your discretion. You can then go for the PhD, which usually takes 2 to 3 years. With me, it's 2 years. So basically, that is that is the journey to qualifying as a psychologist. But the PhD part is optional. It is not mandatory. It's based on your discretion and your practice, and your reach. What do you then want to do with your qualifications? Do you want to be limited to the private sector? Or do you want to be limited to private practice? Or do you want to get into academia or any other field? So that's how the qualification journey goes. So now I just want to touch on the advantages that I've experienced in my practice as a psychologist. The first advantage that you get in as an industrial psychologist is that it gives you flexibility. Flexibility in terms of your career, in terms of the field that you would want to specialize in. So in this instance, I mean that you can get into manufacturing, you can get into healthcare, you can get into mining, you can get into even banking. From my experience, I have got experience in banking as well. I worked at Netbank at some point. Then also I have got experience now in healthcare and also in the legal fraternity, where I am a specialist, a specialist in medical legal assessments. I will explain that to you as we go on. So it gives you that flexibility. It's not limiting. When you are an industrial psychologist, it basically means that wherever there is a workforce, wherever there are employees, you have the capacity to get in. Because remember, psychology, industrial psychology, is the application of psychological principles in the work environment. So the work environment is it's and it's like it's cut across industries. It's flexible. You can get into any field. So the flexibility component of it is what I love the most about my career. Then the second part of it is also the aspect of purpose. It is a very fulfilling field. I won't lie to you, because you have a sense of purpose. You can literally feel and understand the change that you bring within any context. At times, even outside the work environment, you already you can feel the impact that you bring to whichever environment that is. So it is a purpose-filled career. You will be considered in most decision making processes. You'll be considered as top management in most or all of the companies across the globe. They always ask for our opinion. They always call us when they are recruiting, when they are selecting, when they are making decisions. We are talking of the organizational key organizational strategic decisions. We're talking of labor-related decisions. We're talking of any other kinds of advisory. They always consider industrial psychologists to be the go-to people within organizations. So it's very fulfilling. The third point is that it offers you independence. Independence in the sense that you can work independently. Especially in my case, as I have listed that, as I have told you that I am part of the management of about 4 to 5 organizations, wherein I am at the top, which also gives me that kind of independence. Of course, we work as teams and all that, but at the end of the day, I do according to what I can take without any limiting factors. So the goodness of it is that you are allowed to go as far as you can. You are allowed to take in as much as you can for as long as you do it to the best of your abilities. So the importance of psychology, you should always understand, is that it's not about only the application of psychology. It is being a safe psychologist. How are you going to be a psychologist that will serve society, that will serve the environment, that will be safe for everyone around you, that will be safe for the organizations around you? Because it defeats the purpose when you now go out in the world to use your psychology in doing harm to society. So the issue or the main fundamental aspect for you to always understand if you want to be a psychologist is to always know that you should be a safe psychologist. Stop using psychology in your personal relationships. Stop using psychology. Stop using psychology to harm others. Stop using psychology for things that do not benefit the greater good of the society. So that is the main fundamental that you should always carry with. The other aspect that I like the most about my field is that it's the aspect of longevity. We're looking at how you can go for years practicing as a psychologist. I know of so many individuals that have passed the normal retirement age mark, which is usually 65 years, to go beyond 65 years practicing as a psychologist. So we're looking at people who can even practice up to 70 years or more. So it's a very fulfilling and very long career that you would have chosen for yourself. It's not a career that someone will tell you that now you've reached the retirement age, you can step out. No, because remember, you are independent. You are working for yourself most of the time. So no one can really dictate that. For as long as your health allows, and also yourself, according to your personal decisions, you can reach a certain specific age. Then the other advantage that I have experienced myself is personal growth. So as you are studying, as you start to specialize, you'll get that the programs offer you the ability, or they offer you the platform to discover yourself. In as much as it takes time for you to ultimately discover yourself, the study of psychology, especially on an advanced level, gives you a platform to understand yourself better. Understand yourself as an individual, understand yourself within a team, understand yourself within the greater society, understanding your purpose, knowing what you are really built for, what you are here for, what you want to achieve, and the greater good of, for the greater good of society. So for your personal growth, I tell you, from my personal experience, I was a totally different individual before I specialized. In my undergrad years, I was totally different from after I then qualified as a psychologist. It can never be compared. It's like two different characters because process of studying it and the process, because it's highly specialized. As I told you, that the whole process is designed to tap into the inner being of yourself. Because what then matters, especially in your practice, is the inner core of who you are. How best can we tap into the energies that are surrounding you? So that is that. And only just to add another point, I heard the previous speaker saying that the average salary of an industrial psychologist is around 20 to 30,000. I am saying this not based on hearsay, but based on industrial experience as an industrial psychologist. So probably the 20 to 30 is when you just do your honors and you decide to get into the labor market. But when you then go further to do your masters and when you are registered and stuff, it is more fulfilling, it is more rewarding. The 20 to 30 is something that you can make in a few days. I'm just talking from experience. I'm not saying that that is what I make, but I'm talking from experience. I know this because it is a highly specialized field. So at times, going the longer route is always rewarding. When I was a student myself, my peers were already, some of my peers were in the labor market. They were already enjoying the perks of being employed. And at the time, I just soldiered on, and I can safely say that it was worth it. Now it is more rewarding. It is more rewarding than I even imagined, because most of the organizational maneuvers are highly regarded. They place value in them, so they make sure that they reward you according to the value that you are bringing to each and every organization, especially as an industrial psychologist. But if you decide to join the labor market at honor from your honors, when you're done with your honors, then you decide it's fine as well. In the long run, it will become rewarding. In the long run, it will become fulfilling when you are doing whichever role you would have chosen or career path you would have chosen. But speaking from experience as an industrial psychologist, it is as rewarding. It is worth the wait. Of course, it's about 7, 8 years, or even 9 years of your life as a student. But after you are done, you will reap the benefits. You will reap, the harvest of whatever that you have seeded for the past 7 to 8, 9 years of your life. Then also touching on the aspect of the disadvantages thereof. So this is the last segment that I'm just going to touch on, so that you can at least have an understanding of the disadvantages that I have experienced in my journey as an industrial psychologist. The first point is that it is highly demanding. So we are talking from the studies bit of it. As I told you, you need to dedicate 7 to 9 years of your life as a student. That is demanding in itself. That takes a lot from you. That takes a lot of personal sacrifice. It is a decision that you have to make. It is a very serious decision that you have to make. In my journey, I know we started off, especially in our masters here, we started off, we were close to about 9 or 10 of us, but at the end, we were only 5 that made it, because it takes a lot. You need to be on your toes. You need to study hard. You need to work hard, regardless of your intellect. It does not matter if you are as bright. It does not matter if you catch on to things fast. It requires you to work hard. So, especially in the master's year, because now then it's not only about learning, you also be teaching, because they give you a platform to present seminars to students. They give you a platform to research. They give you all those platforms. So you have to work hard. It takes a lot of sacrifice. At that time in my journey, especially in the master's years, I remember I would not sleep any time before the hour of 3 a.m. on a daily basis. My day would start at 6 a.m. and would end the following day at 3 a.m., which definitely should be an indicator that I paid the price. And you will have to pay the price. There are no shortcuts there. If you want to take the shortcuts, you won't make the cut. That's the honest truth. So it's demanding. Even when you then qualify, even when you are practicing, even now, I know that it takes a lot. There's a lot of traveling involved. There's a lot of decision making involved. It takes a lot. Because remember, this is a thinking field. We use our brains to make a living. So at times you get to, by the end of the day, you will be very exhausted. So you should be prepared for that. That is something that you should be prepared for. The journey never stops. Once you have started, it's on until, the casket drops. The second point is the disadvantage that I've experienced is the aspect of ageism. So ageism, from a general definition, is the stereotypes, how we think, prejudice, how we feel, and discrimination, how we act towards others or oneself based on age. I am talking about this especially within the fraternity of psychology. You will find, as I told you, that psychology is a very long field. You can go for years practicing as a psychologist. You can get into your 70s practicing. Now the problem emanates from when you qualify, especially as a young one. I was at my time, I was considered as one of the youngest qualifying psychologists in South Africa. We are looking at in my 20s. Now, as a 20-year-old, you are getting into a field as a psychologist, and you are working with people in their 60s, late 60s, late 50s, 70s, and that is the demographic. Usually, they are older people within the field. It is very challenging. Most of them, they obviously, of course, think that you do not know much. Some of them, they just do not want to really come to the party or collaborate when it comes to certain issues or matters that need collaboration. Some of them just think that you are just too young to be voicing an opinion that is of value to whichever conversation or whichever process that you would be engaging in at that point. So ageism is a very apparent, and it's very apparent within the field. It's happening within the field, wherein most older psychologists look down upon the young ones. But of course, your work will talk volumes. Your work will speak for itself. Your work will definitely put you on the map. Eventually, even in my case, eventually they will start, to get along with you. They will start to collaborate with you. They will embrace you. of course, after you have proven yourself, which is just a downside because you have to prove yourself. So that is another issue. The third point is that there is a scarcity in terms of internship opportunities. Remember, I told you that for you to qualify, you have to go for a year's internship, a year or two, depending on the nature of the internship. That opportunity, those opportunities, internship opportunities are scarce. Why they are scarce is because, one, it takes a lot of resources for companies or organizations to take in interns, intern psychologists. It takes a lot of resources. So at times, most companies shy away from the process of taking in interns under their wing. The second point is that because it's a specialized field, not many organizations have got supervising psychologists on the ground to be assisting interns, because the HPCSA standards stipulate that they ought to have to be a supervising psychologist that will be supervising the intern. So most our organizations have not yet reached that point wherein they employ in a psychologist on a permanent basis because it is expensive for them. Some of them, they do not have the budget. But those that have the budget, they offer the internships. And some, you can do the unstructured internships, wherein you do a part of the internship elsewhere, then another part elsewhere until you complete. So that is also the issue. Then the fourth point is that the fourth disadvantage or limitation that I have experienced in my practice is that there is a racial imbalance in terms of practitioners, in terms of psychologists. This is obviously emanating from the historical elements of the South African context, wherein most marginalized learners were not afforded the opportunity to be studying psychology at an advanced level. Remember that for you, especially to qualify as a psychologist, you ought to reach the master's level, which is very expensive, which becomes very expensive because at times some of us don't have funding. Especially back in the day, people didn't have funding, so you could not even you would end at undergrad level or honors level. That would be the ultimate. Going to masters, going for an internship, and most just for your information, most internship programs are under they're not they're unpaid. Most of them, if they're paid, it's anything less than 10,000 rand. So it's just your basics that are catered for. So the internship is just not as rewarding. Some, they just when they just hear of an unpaid internship, they will just run away. So that is the other issue. So because of the historical context of South Africa, we see that there is an imbalance in terms of practitioners. But I'm happy that now we are embracing, there are now new measures such as funding for students to attain higher levels of education, to go for masters and stuff, which gives also platform for previously marginalized practitioners to be coming into the mix of things. Because remember, this is not about race. No, I'm not talking about race today, but I'm just talking about diversity. We ought to have a diverse field. We ought to have diverse practitioners for us to be as effective. Because a psychologist practicing in Santo can never be compared to a psychologist practicing in Soshango. Can never be compared to a psychologist practicing in Mamelodi. The issues that are experienced by people within low-income households or low-income areas are quite different from the issues that are experienced by people from high-income areas or high-income households. So for us to have a balance in the world, for us to have a society that is functional, we ought to have a balance in terms of practitioners. So I also urge, everyone to just keep pushing. We need more practitioners, of course, regardless of color, regardless of race. But in the end, we need to work together. We need to understand that we are working for the greater good of society. So we need to have a balance. We ought to have more psychologists, especially also from previously marginalized societies, to be getting into the mix of things, just to be as active and just to also advocate for previously marginalized societies in terms of mental health. Because mental health is as important as physiological well-being. It ought to be taken seriously and considered seriously. And the last part of the disadvantage is that it's a very financially demanding field. Because remember, especially in my case, I was self-funded. And at the time that I had reached, at the time I was finishing my master's, even my mother was tired of me, you know. She could not handle the burden because it takes a lot financially. It's a financially demanding field. So it's something that you ought to consider. If you do not have funding, always understand that it's going to be as difficult because now, if you've got outstanding fees and stuff like that, and they will withhold your qualifications and you cannot practice because even when you're registering at HPCSA, you ought to have all your qualifications in hand. So without those qualifications, they won't consider. So it's a very financially demanding field that ought to be considered. If you don't have funding, it's something that you should really plan ahead for and always understand that you ought to have the finances to pursue up to the end when you then qualify as a psychologist. So that is basically my story as a psychologist. And also, if you guys ought to or you need to have more insight in terms of industrial psychology as a field, as a whole, feel free to follow my YouTube channel. I've got a YouTube channel, a recently launched YouTube channel, which is Thomas Tsikai. Just search Thomas Tsikai and I subscribe to my YouTube channel. It is also enlightening in terms of industrial psychology. And also you can follow me on my, you can also contact me through my website, www.thomastsikai.co.za, www.thomastsikai.co.za. There you'll find all my contact details, my email and stuff like that, wherein I can attend to questions, I can assist where I can, and I can advise where I can. It's always something that, you know, even in my journey, I lacked in terms of, you know, information. Information is very important. If you don't have the information, it's as difficult. But I'm willing to share the information with you guys because I've been in a position of lack of information. But fortunately, I managed to sail through. So now I feel that I've got the duty to give that information to you guys free of charge. So always feel free to reach out. And lastly, before I conclude, I just want to speak on the role of attitude. Attitude in your studies, attitude in your work, attitude in whatever you do. Always understand that attitude is more important, is as important as talent. Without the right attitude, you will not be able to reach or to attain your goals. You ought to have the right attitude. In whatever you do, if you have the right attitude, if you are as focused, you will achieve. If you are as focused, you will make it. So always know that attitude is as important as talent. Wherever you go, whatever you do, always apply the right attitude. With that, I thank you so much. Any questions, comments, additions, please feel free to contribute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tsikai. So basically now what we're going to do is we're going to open the floor for questions from the students, if you're okay with that.
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. So yeah, the floor is open. You may ask your questions if you have any. So I saw a hand. Yes, you may go through, Ms. Patsy.
My question is, what were the different roles you played when you worked in the healthcare field versus the financing field?
Okay. So at present, I am in the healthcare field, wherein I am more of I'm a medical legal specialist. So I'll just give you an example. I think the easiest example would be the Oscar Pistorius story, wherein if you were following it closely, you saw a psychologist that was called to the stand that testified as an expert. So basically, that is what I do. That is most of my work, wherein I am mostly doing medical negligence cases. When I'm talking of medical negligence, is when, let's say, a doctor a medical doctor or physician or specialist does not do the right things in terms of assisting a patient, which leads to problems. Then I'm called in as an industrial psychologist to give expert opinion on how that medical negligence or malpractice incident would have affected an individual in terms of their career. So I even go to court for that. I even take the stand on trials, different courts all across South Africa. You are called anywhere else, everywhere in South Africa you go, you attend court and stuff like that. So that is more of the medical bits. So you'll be exposed more to the medical issues and stuff. Then the banking side is more on the side of organizational development, employee wellness, psychometrics, all those things. So it's more, it's more on applying psychology in terms of the workforce, motivating the individuals to enhance their performance, getting the best out of the employees and stuff. So that is the difference between the healthcare side and the banking side.
All right, thank you. So with that, I just wanted to ask, you say industrial psychology, you do your master's, right? And you're qualified. So with the medical field, do you also have to study like medicine?
No, you don't have. No, you don't have. As an industrial psychologist, right? You just as once you qualify as an industrial psychologist, you are allowed to then venture into to get into that field. So, but basically, how I got in is through my supervisor. Because my supervisor had already. Usually, it's always easier when you've got a supervisor that is within the field already. So they show you how to, they give you a smooth passage into the field. It's quite difficult when you just wake up and you just say, "Nah, I want to be in healthcare." It's difficult. You won't understand how it goes, where you get the clients, and where the money is really, because you really need to understand where the cracks of it is, and who are your clients and stuff like that.
And we've got one question here in the chat. It says, "Good evening, sir. Can we register under both the supervised and private practice? In addition, are the requirements different or the same?"
Okay, I doubt if you can register in both. I'm not too sure, but I think you have to register in one. It's either you are in independent practice or you are supervised practice. And the second bit of the question, please, may you repeat the second bit?
So she's just asking if the requirements are different or the same for the
for the two. Definitely, they are different. That's why independent practice is more, it's less limiting, because the requirements are quite strict as compared to supervised practice. Supervised practice is limiting because you'll be practicing under a psychologist, and of course the requirements won't be as demanding as independent. That's why you'll be supervised. At the end of the day, anything that is easier, always know that it's not as rewarding.
Okay, understand. We have a hand. Basi, you can go.
With regards to earning a salary, do you earn it like hourly or monthly? Like, how do you charge? Like, how does the rate go?
Okay. Yeah, no, that's a good one. So usually it's hourly. So it depends on your experience and stuff. So we've got tariffs that are usually set by medical aids and stuff like that. It's just a general practice. So you don't get, in my opinion, you don't charge anything less than 1,000 per hour. So usually it's 1,100, 1,200, or even more. Depends on your experience. So it's usually per hour. When you are especially when you are practicing independent. But when you are practicing under someone, especially let's say there are some people who actually are qualified, but choose the employment route to be employed by another psychologist, which is something that I do not understand myself. But it's something that some people opt for, when they will just be given a salary, But the salary won't be bad at the end of the day. It will be something that is reasonable and market related. So yeah.
Okay, you can go through Pastor.
In terms of the difference between the independent practice and the supervised practice, which one makes you work the most?
I wouldn't know because I have not. I'm an independent practice, psychologist. So but obviously, usually, employment, the supervised one would work more. But I don't know. I wouldn't really know because I've not really experienced, or I've never met someone who's working under the supervised practice category. But I hear that I've heard, just in passing, in terms of professional circles, that most of the guys that are working in supervised practice are usually working at the military and stuff like that, in the government and all that. So at times, some people work for the government, they earn a lot and they do nothing. It's something that happens. So I wouldn't really know.
Okay. So I just have my biggest concern, especially with getting into your honors and masters, is age-wise. So I heard from one of my friends who's doing masters, they say that age is also, as you said, a big factor. So if I want to do my master's straight, like let's say I'm 21 now, I'm doing my honors, and then next year I'll be 22 doing my master's, will they allow that? Or do we have to have a certain age?
In all honesty, I won't lie to you. As I told you before, the age is in part of it. So remember that most of the people that are in decision making are older,
Yeah.
and that is the other problem. So it's quite difficult for them. They've got some lack of trust in the younger generation. I don't know what happens. I don't know. Of course they will. At times you might be lucky. Actually, it's always worth trying. I'm not going to discourage you.
Okay.
Always try, right? You might be fortunate enough to actually get in. But at times when you look at, even when I was doing my master's, I was like, the youngest. Was two of us were young, and the rest were quite, yeah. So it depends. At times it's just worth trying. At times they want to give you time, and also remember that these are psychologists that are making this decision. At times they've got their reasons, especially when they're doing the interviews, selections, and stuff like that. At times they can pick up that no, emotionally or mentally, this person has not reached that age of maturity, because
Okay.
it is demanding, as I told you. We do not want people to be, under emotional distress. So at
Okay.
times, if you experience a delay, let's say they don't take you that year, do not lose hope. It happens, a lot of times that people don't get in that. Remember that they only take a specific number of people, and a small number of people. It doesn't mean that you are incompetent. It doesn't mean that you are not worthy. It just means that the time is not yet right. And when the time is right, you'll get it.
Okay. And with regards to, because I read that in psychology you do the side doctorate and not the PhD. Are they the same thing?
The what?
We have, isn't there's a PhD, the
Yes.
actual doctorate, and then there's
Yes.
another one for psychology, the psychology
I,
doctorate.
or the psychology doctorate. That one was scrapped off. In South
Okay.
Africa, that one, yeah, in South Africa, it's only now the usually what happened in South Africa is back in the day, actually. This is a fun fact. When you qualified as a psychologist, back in the day, I think it stopped in the 90s or early 2000s. I'm not too sure. But apparently, when you just qualified, after your internship, after your board exams, they would give you that title.
Mhm.
But they scrapped it off. I don't know for what reason. Because remember, you even take longer, or even as much time as the medical fraternity to get your registration and stuff. But I don't know what then happened. Then they scrapped it off. So now usually it's just the PhD route. It's actually the PhD route that I know of.
Okay, so you have to have like your PhD to be considered a doctor. Like, let's say
Yes,
you have to have a PhD in.
yes, of course. But what then happens is that this is something I shouldn't be telling you guys, but I'm gonna tell. So once you just qualify and stuff, wherever you go, in most places, they will just consider you there.
Okay,
Naturally, it just happens. It comes with the title, with the
okay.
with qualification.
All
So
right.
most of the times, you even try to correct that, but people will just keep on using that.
Okay. And for example, I did not know anything about how to go on about if I wanted to become an industrial psychologist. So now I'm doing a BA in majoring psychology and sociology. So I don't have industrial psychology, but I want to do it. What do I do? Can you give me plans?
And it's not even a trade smash. For your honors, you just go for the industrial psychology honors.
Oh,
So
they
they will
don't.
always consider you for as long as you've got a psychological background. That's
Ah,
what I know. So it probably differs in institutions, but
mm,
for my institution, it was just because if you have a basic psychological background in terms of the undergrad, then you are eligible for as long as your marks are good.
okay, that's good. Thank you so much. Any questions? I'll give them like 2 minutes to see if there's any questions in the chat. Sorry, I'm seeing. Okay, yeah. If you register under independent practice, will you still be able to work for the government?
Yes, of course, you will. So if you are registered under independent practice, basically you are just as you are the you do not have anything tying or binding you. You can do whatever you want. You are free to go to work for the government. You are free to work in the private sector. You are free to start your own practice. There is nothing. So with the supervised practice, you cannot start your own practice. That's the problem. But with an independent practice, you can start your own practice. Me, I started my own practice just a year after I had qualified. Because independent practice, as the name says, the title says, you are independent. You are allowed to do whatever you feel like doing for as long as it is industrial psychology related.
Okay. And there's another question here. Is it possible to acquire my master's or qualification and practice anywhere in the world besides where I got the qualification?
Yes, I think so. But remember that each and every state or country has got its own regulations in terms of practicing. So mostly, it's easier for South African qualified psychologists to practice in Ireland. That one I know. I'm not too sure if the regulations are still the same, but it's just once you get your qualification here, you can just convert it, and they accept it. But anywhere else in the world, they've got their own requirements. They might tell you, no, you should go for an internship again here in this particular country for you to have an understanding of the context. Because remember, psychology alone doesn't make sense without an understanding of the context. You have to understand the context, the surrounding context, the surrounding environment for you to be as successful in your practice.
Okay. And another question: is it possible, or not possible? Is it true that after registering, for example, as an independent psychologist, do you still have to go through like your psychometric examinations and stuff, like after years, to see if you're
After
still
you
like, yes?
no.
Okay.
No. What we have to do is that after your because remember that after your register, you have gone through all the processes.
Hmm.
Well, that is the ultimate. That is basically the ultimate of psychology when you are a registered psychologist. Because once you are a registered psychologist, you've got what we call a practice number. So your
Okay.
practice number is like your ID. Wherever
Okay.
you go, your practice number is the identifying factor that identifies you as a psychologist. So if a person comes to you and says, I'm a psychologist, I say, what's your practice number? If they do not have that practice number, they are not psychologists. That is the only differentiating factor. So that practice, so basically with a practice number, you know, it it basically sets you apart from the rest.
Okay. Thank you so much. There's another question here. Are the jobs related to psychology you work in with just a BA while working on your honors, or you're just a sitting duck till masters?
No, they are jobs. As I said, if you're listening, I said that you can actually get into the labor market after your undergrad. You can get into the labor market after your honors. It's very possible. There are jobs. I won't lie to you. You can be very fortunate to get a good job. But what I just said from my personal experience is that it is more rewarding, more fulfilling when you are a registered psychologist as compared to when you are just, when you have branched out earlier and stuff like that. But at times you find that there are some people who are fortunate to have fulfilling careers even after their undergrad, fulfilling careers even after their honors, when they get into the corporate world, especially the corporate world. You know this, it's a world full of endless possibilities. Anything can happen. You can become the CEO. It's something that is possible. Yes, it's
Hmm.
possible. So I wouldn't want to say that there are no jobs. You are not sitting. You are sitting ducks. You are not sitting ducks. There's always a way. Some even get into employment after undergrad just to get money so that they can fund the next level and stuff like that. Once they've got enough funding and all that, enough money, then they go to the next level. The journey is different for everyone, one of us. What is important is how we is the final end result getting there. So yeah.
I've got another one here. I heard that you did your honors in Namibia. So does that mean I can also do my honors or masters anywhere in the world?
It depends. So basically, the Namibian system is the same, literally almost the same as the South African system. So that is why it was, it's accepted here in South Africa. But in any other country, it's quite tricky. You have to find out first. Because remember, the educational systems are quite different in any other. But remember, South Africa, Namibia is like a mini South Africa. So the system, the education system and stuff like that is the same. So it's not as difficult for them to accept it here. But in any other countries, it's quite difficult because it would be different and stuff like that. At times they will tell you to do a bridging year and stuff like that and all that. But Namibia, South Africa, almost the same thing.
Okay. I don't know if there's anyone else with any questions. I'll just give it a minute or so, and then we can conclude. In case someone is typing. Pastor Tsana, do you have any questions? anything you'd like to say?
Not at this moment.
All right, I think we can then end the meeting since there are no more questions. And oh, did you wanted to say something? So you can take over from here, right?
Yes.
No.
If we don't have, okay, we have one more question.
The question goes, if you're an independent practitioner, can you work both at a public and private sector at the same time?
Okay, okay. That depends with the requirements of the job. At times, you find that in public, the public sector will tell you that they are open to that. They're open to practitioners having their own practice. Most public, in most public institutions, they allow. So you find that there even I know people who are like the chief psychologist in the Department of Labor, and they've got their own private practice. So it's very possible. It just depends. At times it's a matter of the employer. Is the employer, especially in the public, is the employer willing to let you practice independently as well during your free time, for as long as you are not, for as long as the work is your private work is not interfering with your work in the public sector. So most of the case, especially in the health, because remember that psychology is regarded as a health profession. So most of the health practitioners registered under HPCSA, you will find that at a later stage they will be working for the public sector whilst having their own practice. So it's something that is common, but it's also dependent on what the employer wants. But it's possible.
I just have one more question, and I'm grateful that I was here today because I understand now once you have your master's and you're registered as a industrial psychologist, is it the same thing as human resources? Because I know those two have to do with working in the workspace. Are they the same?
They're not.
Okay.
That's why this one is psychology is a bit more complicated in terms of registering and stuff like that and getting there. Human resources you can get there even after your undergrad. So it's less complicated. Remember, psychology now, especially now. Okay, let me give you just one significant difference between a psychologist and a human resources practitioner. I'm allowed to administer psychological tests. I'm allowed to interpret psychological tests. I'm allowed to report on my findings and use those findings in terms of decision making. It could be employment related decisions or strategic decisions and stuff like that. Whereas a human resources practitioner is not allowed to use any tests.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. I just wanted that clarification. So I think that's all. Pastor Sana, you can take over. Thank you.
Okay, so seeing as we don't have any other questions, on behalf of Psyche, we just want to say thank you so much, Mr. Tsikai, for availing yourself for this session and giving us the opportunity to ask you questions. And thank you for wanting to help students who want to learn more about the field. I'm sure like a lot of people have learned a lot tonight, and we really appreciate what you have told us tonight and what we've learned from you. So thank you so much.
Right, it's an absolute pleasure. As I said previously, it's actually an honor to be sharing such information with you guys because I come from a position of lack of information. And I always feel that it's now my duty as well to give such information to people free of charge. For some people, whenever you ask them such questions, they think that you are a competitor to them. They are like, no, if I tell this young one, if I give this information to this young one, the next thing they will come into the labor market and take my job. No, the cake is enough for everyone. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you. I'll put up your details again for everyone to see so they can see how to contact you. And guys, please feel free to ask, to send through questions and check the YouTube channel out if you want to know more. And this will be posted on our Psyche YouTube. So guys, you're more than welcome to go there to see. And good evening, everyone. Have a good night and happy studying.